Welcome in, everybody, to the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. Robbie, Lastella here. We're back with another March edition of the Lastella Report. We've got special guests today. First off, we're joined by Bracketometry, Dom Lease. Dom, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Absolutely. Going fantastic. Happy that it's March and ready to get this going.
We were just talking about it. I mean, this season has gone by crazy fast, and I feel like the next couple weeks are going to really just fly right by. Are there any conference tournaments you're dialed into over the next couple days?
Man, as a bracketologist, you got to be dialed into every single one. I mean, there's some specifically that are certainly going to have a lot of intrigue. An SEC comes to mind right out of the gate, where you got four teams fighting for spots on the one seed line. Big Ten, obviously, if Michigan State maybe can make a little push to try to get there as well, but a ton of other teams jockeying for that middle seed position, and really all across the board. And those are the power conference ones, but my favorite, all the mid-major ones as well. They don't have as much bracketology impact, but still seeing those small teams just get to earn their way into the field is always so much more fun than those teams playing that are all going to be in there anyway.
It's something serious. I mean, I'm watching A-Sun games last night, and I'm rooting for Austin P. The coach in the military fatigue, Coach Gibson. That's an awesome storyline. There's just so many little things every now and then. Tough break though for Austin P. last night. They didn't do too well, but Dom, tell me about bracketometry. Intriguing to me. You had the best ranked bracket, 2023 the year. My Owls went to the Final Four. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and how has it been this year, kind of seeding the field? Has it been a little bit more difficult, or just another year?
Absolutely. No, been doing this for probably about 5 or 6 years now. I mean, just started off as a little bit of a hobby, always keeping up with like Lenardi and his brackets when I was going through school and thinking like, oh no, that team shouldn't be there and this team shouldn't be there. But at the time I had no idea what I was talking about. But then I was like, let me really actually start looking into this and see why these teams are seated where, so I can actually have some formulated opinions when I'm arguing about where teams should be seated. And then once I kind of figured out the process, I was like, hey, let me just start doing this myself. And it's been pretty successful and a pretty fun thing to do on the side. So definitely wouldn't give it up. And this year, though, is made me reconsider, jokingly, of course. But this has been one of the harder years to seed for a while, at least at this point. I mean, maybe over the next week and a half, things start to sort themselves out a little bit more. And you look at certain areas right now, and there's 6 teams that have a 1 seed resume. You look at like the 6 through 8 line, and all of those teams have the exact same resume. The bubble this year is horrific. It's hard to look back at previous years and be like, all right, well, usually a team that has this and this is in, or a team that, they have this and this, they're out. If you try to base it off of past data this year, you're not going to have 68 teams, and someone's got to fill those spots. So very good at the top this year, but weak on the bubble, kind of a big dichotomy on both sides.
Yeah, no, the bubble's definitely been interesting. I followed it closer the past 2 years with FAU, and I'm kind of wishing this year's bubble was last year. Would have been breathing much more easily.
Oh, absolutely.
But I mean that's what makes everything fun. And hey, you know what? UNC's creeping in there with only one Q1 win, but they got a little help on their side in old Bubba over there. So we'll see. Anything's possible. But you mentioned it being difficult, so that's why I got to ask. Are you for or against expanding the field? Because the debate's been on Twitter lately, and I want to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, this year, if I'm just basing it on this year, I would say absolutely not, because we're already getting teams in that shouldn't be in. If you base it on the last few years, though, I'd be fine with 4 more teams in, just to really kind of give the committee that buffer room, really. If you could guarantee me every year the committee would get it exactly right and put the exact right 68 teams in the field, I think 68 is the right number. But every year I always feel like there's 1 or 2 teams that, they were in the committee's first 4 out that personally I think should have been in. If you add 4 more spots, then really no one can complain at that point, because if you weren't even in the first 4 out, which would now be the last 4 in, you don't even have much of an argument. So Would I hate it? No, I don't think this year is a good argument for it at all, and I would be fine with them keeping it where it is too. But you add four more teams to it, have four more play-in games. I don't hate that. More basketball at the beginning, and then hey, you still then you're only going to have 64 when the actual tournament starts, regardless. So, not completely opposed to it, but I don't think it's a huge debate, needle mover either way, like people are making it out to be. The only way I'd really get mad about it is if they tried to add more than that. Like if they added 8 more teams or 16 more teams, then we're just completely diluting the field, and I would have an issue.
Anything more than four, and then you're really all the other postseason tournaments. I get it, no one really cares, but the schools do it. The schools want to play postseason, especially the mid majors, and at that point, they're going to be playing an under 500 team from another mid major like that. That at that point, then yeah, the postseason for them is irrelevant. Get a couple of these power teams in with them, then all of a sudden these other tournaments they actually mean a little bit. You get a win over a power program, and you can hang your hat on that. But on
Absolutely.
right? But looking at the field overall, a lot of people like to bank on the one seeds, especially casuals. I mean, I see it. St. John's can come out of nowhere and win it all. But for you, is it Auburn, Duke versus everybody else, or is there a Bama, a Florida, a Houston that you realistically think could contend for the national championship?
Yeah, I mean, I think the top 6 teams, honestly, can realistically contend for the national championship. Auburn and Duke are obviously the favorites, but those 6 teams I said that have one seed resumes, the other 3 SEC teams, Tennessee, Bama, and Florida, they're not on the level of Auburn, but they're close. If Auburn were to be knocked out, to be good enough to go toe to toe with anyone else. And then Houston as well, I think, has a really good team that can go toe to toe even with the likes of Auburn and Duke. So, I would say those 6, none of them would shock me if they won it. Obviously, if it's not Duke or Auburn, it would be maybe a little bit of a surprise, but March Madness is made for surprises. So I can't nail it down to just 2 teams. But I think once you expand it to those 6, I'd definitely take one of those 6 versus the field.
Houston's got to have some good karma banked up. I mean, the way their season went out last year, I mean, that's just the injury was brutal. And so I think they're due for a good year. We'll see. They've got, in my opinion, Kelvin Sampson is one of the better coaches out there. He knows how to rally these guys. So I'm hoping for Houston to make a little bit of noise. But like you said, anything's possible. It could be one of these teams out of the, you look at Memphis, Drake out of the MVC. I mean, those are Memphis is a little more realistic than Drake, but hey, no one thought FAU could come out of CUSA a couple years ago. But speaking of Memphis and Drake, they present bid stealer opportunities. And, are there any other conferences outside of the AAC and the Missouri Valley to watch out for? And who is on that bubble that could potentially be harmed by these at-large bids?
Absolutely. I would say there's actually 2 more conferences you could add in there. You hit the nail on the head with Drake and Memphis. If they were to lose in their conference tournaments, they're probably still in. And obviously, whoever wins it would steal a spot. Unless maybe Drake lost in the very first round, they could get knocked out themselves, but it's unlikely. The other 2 would be VCU out of the A10. I think they've done enough now at this point to where they're kind of in a similar spot as Drake. Or as long as they don't get an early A10 tournament loss, as long as they kind of go deep enough, they're going to be in regardless. So if someone else wins the A10 and that tournament's chaos every single year, that's a great candidate for a bid thief. And then the under the radar one that's definitely a possibility as well is the Big West. UC San Diego, I think, could absolutely get an at-large if they were to lose. Now, they probably have a little bit less of a cushion than the others. I think they would actually have to make the Big West final and probably lose to UC Irvine specifically. That's the only one that wouldn't really be that bad of a loss. Yeah. But if the final's UC Irvine over UC San Diego, I think UC San Diego still gets in, and now Big West is getting 2 teams, and there's another bid stolen there.
The 2-bid Big West has been a storyline I followed all year. Those are 2 awesome stories right there. That's another thing I'm kind of rooting for, but we'll see what happens out there. But taking a look at the bubble overall, who do you have, as of heading into to rivalry weekend? Who do you kind of have as your last 4 in, and who's your first 4 out?
Definitely, and I think there was kind of a clear, maybe 7 teams that were my last 4 in and then my first 3 out. And then there's a little bit more of a gap after that. There's not a lot of teams on the outside looking in that have a great chance to get in. But my last 4 in right now would be Nebraska, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Arkansas in no particular order. And then first three out, just knocking on the door, would be Boise, Xavier, and North Carolina. And I could really see any four of those seven, when it's all said and done, getting those last spots. And then anyone behind that group, it's going to be tough. I mean, maybe like a Texas or a TCU if they go on a crazy run, or maybe someone like on the upper echelon, like if Indiana falls apart down the stretch, or Utah State has another horrific game, they could fall out. But most likely, throwing those outliers out, I think those first seven I said, it's going to be four of those seven kind of jockeying for those last four spots here.
And to ask, I want to ask about Arkansas. They've been, to me, one of the most surprising teams this year. I thought, they'd have a little bit more success, but then they've had injuries too. So, but now they've played themselves into a chance to potentially still make it. Look, to me, I don't know. I'm not the expert here. It looks like they have to go 2-0 to get in, but could they go 1-1 and get that Coach Cal bump? And is it a thing? And do they have some leeway here down the stretch?
Yeah. Now, given the fact that they play two tournament teams that are almost certainly in at this point with Vanderbilt and Mississippi State down the stretch, could they go 1-1 and still make it? I think they could. They couldn't afford an early SEC tournament loss at that point. And those late tournament games really don't tend to matter much. But if you have an early bad loss, that's still going to stick in the committee's mind. I think 2-0 probably gets them in, and 1-1 just get deep enough into the tournament once the committee's kind of starting to lock that field, and they'll still stay in. 0-2, though, they'd be in some deep trouble, even if they got that Coach Cal bump, which it's one of those things that you never really know. I mean, it realistically is not a thing, but the committee isn't purposely going out of their way to say, oh, well, I'd probably have him out, but Coach Cal, let's put him in. They're not actively doing that or saying it out loud, but could they have some unrealized biases in the back of their mind that are making them think the resume is a little bit better than it actually is? They're human, so it absolutely could. But they're not purposely rigging it to do that, but again, sometimes that just kind of subconsciously happens. So the answer is no, with a little sprinkle of yes.
Well, I feel like that's what kind of makes it interesting. It's not a computer that's doing it. There's some human involvement, and some people may not like that, but I'm a fan of it. It gives a little bit of some personality, I guess you could say, to that. But I going into looking at the one seeds a little bit. Who are the one seeds locked up by now, or there's still some leeway at all for some potential movement?
It feels like three of the four are almost all locked up. I mean, Auburn is a complete lock, and Duke and Houston are probably pretty close to locks, barring some kind of just losing their last game of the regular season bad and losing early in the conference tournament. But realistically, Auburn, Duke, and Houston are going to end up on that one line. And then it just feels like it's a battle between those other three SEC teams to get that last one spot. And that is still completely up in the air. Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, I could see any of those three teams get it. A lot of them still playing each other down the stretch and maybe again in the conference tournament. So a lot of the jockeying for position there for that last one. And those are probably, I think, as strong as the SEC has been this year, it's going to be one of those. I'd be hard pressed to see the SEC only get Auburn on the one line. So realistically, it's three locks and then one more SEC team. Only X factor would maybe be Michigan State if they win out and win the Big Ten. If all three of those SEC teams kind of stumble down the stretch, or Houston takes a bad loss somewhere, maybe Michigan State could steal a spot there. But most likely we'll be seeing Auburn, Duke, Houston, and then one more SEC team.
Can't have too many SEC teams this year. There's talent across the board. I mean, I saw Vanderbilt way back early in the season when they lost to Drake in the Charleston, and I could tell right away. I mean, they had coaching, they had star power, and they had and some big men too, which I think is always important. And they're here. They're sneaking in, and they're going to get in as well. So that conference is just insane to me. I don't know. Did coming into the year, did you think the SEC was going to be this dominant?
I thought they were going to be the best conference in basketball this year, but I don't think anyone could say they thought they were going to be this good, where you could have a team like Oklahoma with hardly any SEC wins still barely on the right side of the bubble just because of how good they were out of conference. I mean, the fact that they can be so far below 500 in conference and still have a shot at the field, and right now there's a chance only two SEC teams miss it. No, I've never seen a conference be this good, maybe ever. So I thought they'd be the best, but not this the best.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I mean, some people were putting Porter Moser on the hot seat, and all he could still play his way right into the NCAA tournament. So I mean,
Absolutely.
it's a crazy thing to me. But I wanted to go back and ask about Memphis specifically. They're kind of a wild card team just because of the AAC, and so they're at the. I think I saw you had them at a 7 seed right now. Is that how? I mean, they play UTSA tonight. That'd be a damaging loss. But if they make it out of the regular season undefeated, are they pretty much kind of locked into that 7 seed, or could they potentially hurt themselves or help themselves in the AAC tournament?
Yeah, I think right now the 6 through 8 lines are incredibly close. I mean, from my top 8 seed to my bottom 2 6 seeds, you could just straight swap them, and I would understand the argument between doing that. That's one of the tightest areas on the field, and I kind of just have Memphis right in the middle of that cluster because they're kind of one of the weirder resumes to analyze. So it's almost just like hedging my bet. I could see him anywhere from a 6 to an 8, but feel like if I had him at a 7 right now, at worst, I'd be 1 off. But of course, that means what they do down the stretch could absolutely affect their seed too, given that it's so close. I mean, if they win out and win the AAC tournament, probably looking at projecting them at a 6. Maybe they're still a 7, but I would guess maybe more likely a 6, depending on what other teams do. But if they don't win the AAC tournament, wherever they lose isn't going to be a great loss. So then that's maybe more than likely bumping them down to an 8. So right now I have them at that 7, but it almost feels like good chance they either go up a seed line or down a seed line. But then also, like I said, it depends so much on what those other teams do as well, just because all of those resumes are so close. Memphis just needs to start rooting against all those other teams I have projected near them.
I know the Memphis fan base very well from my time covering the AAC, and I don't think they want to find themselves into another 8-9 game.
No.
If they do, they're going to be at Tim Pernetti's door begging to get out of the conference very soon. That's always funny to me. I mean, they're a storied brand, and they're, in my opinion, definitely power material, and they're doing the best they can, but sometimes it's just not good enough. But big weekend ahead in terms of some rivalry matchups. I mean, Auburn-Alabama rematch this Sunday, to me, seems like has some 1 seed implications right there. Is there any other rivalry games that could potentially affect things this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one right out of the gate. I'll touch on it first. I mean, right now, I said with how close it is for that last 1 seed, I think if Alabama goes and wins in Auburn, that puts them in pole position to get that last 1 seed, and then they would have to do something to lose it, as opposed to someone else being able to take that away from them. So yeah, that's a massive one. But for Auburn, they can lose that, and they're still a 1 seed. They're probably still number 1 overall. Their resume is just absolutely insane. Another one, it's cliche, but Duke, North Carolina is an absolutely massive game. Again, maybe not for Duke. They'd probably still be in decent position for a 1 seed with a loss. But North Carolina right now, being in my first 4 out, that would be the kind of win that would absolutely catapult them into my field. And then once you're in at that point with a win over Duke, you just need to avoid a bad loss in the ACC tournament, and they would probably stay in. But if they lose that game, and then you're going to need a big win that the committee is going to realize later on to get back in. And the only ones that would be a chance of big wins would be late in the ACC tournament. And at that point, the committee is kind of already finalizing their field. So this really might be make or break for North Carolina making the field or not. So I know it doesn't seem like this is the year that game should matter, but it really does for the bubble picture. And then finally, third one, I would probably say keep your eye on just in terms of the big games this weekend would be St. John's Marquette. Right now, I got St. John's sneaking into that last 2 seed, but there's a lot of teams you can make an argument for taking that last spot. And St. John's, as good as their metrics are, their overall resume is, they don't have the volume of quality wins as some of those other teams. So I really think they need this one at Marquette to be the cherry on top of their resume to stay on that 2 line. Even though it wouldn't be a bad loss, I think I would probably have to move them back down to a 3 if they don't pick this one up at Marquette.
St. John's and Marquette is going to be a fun one for sure. Auburn and Alabama. I don't know. I mean, Auburn handled business last time, but this one's going to be. I mean, we'll see what Alabama's made of. Nate Oates, I think, is a great coach, and we'll see what adjustments he has. And they're another team too. That's what I'm going to ask you. I could see about 25 teams end up in the Final Four right now. But Dom, if a season ended today, who's your Final Four?
Oh, man, that is a tough question. Now, I mean, I hate going chalky, but this feels like almost like one of the years you have to go a little bit chalky, especially with some of those top teams. I mean, I can't not pick Auburn, and I can't not pick Duke this year. Would I be stunned if you told me do both make it or any other result? I'd probably say any other result. I'm sure one of them gets upset at some point, but then good luck picking who. So in my brackets, I'm definitely taking Auburn and Duke. And then depending on the matchups, I hate picking 3-1 seeds, but I'd probably have to take Houston as well. I mean, the only reason they're not even on the level of those other two is because of a rocky start to the season. But since then, Duke and Auburn have just been so dominant compared to the rest of the basketball landscape. It'd probably be one of my more chalky years, but I might have to pick all 3. And then beyond that, if I was going to go completely chalk and then I had to pick one more of those SEC teams between Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida, I think I actually like Florida the best. But at this point, if I'm going 3-1 seeds, I'd probably want to look somewhere a little further down the bracket, just to at least have a little bit of fun when I'm picking my Final Four as opposed to taking all the favorites. So then I'd probably look to someone like Oregon, maybe as a little fun flyer pick. There's a team that they can beat anyone and they can lose to anyone. They have a ton of great wins, and then they also just have a ton of questionable losses. But it seems like their season's kind of going like this. They started great, had that little bit of a dip, but suddenly it looks like they're starting to find their footing again and start to find that early season form where they were just picking up Q1 wins left and right. Obviously, let's see what they do in the Big Ten tournament. Maybe they just get blown out in the second round and like, all right, they're back to bad again. But I just kind of have a little gut feeling with them. They always find a way to do well in March. And they were one of my Final Four picks at the start of the year. I was completely off the bandwagon, but now they're starting to reel me back in.
Yeah, you know what? I like a lot of those. Though I'm reeled in right now by Michigan just because, the Dusty May connection there. But they've got size. They've got experience, guard play. I don't know. I mean, if they make some noise in the Big Ten tournament, if they could show me that they can compete with Michigan State, I like them to make some noise. Now, we'll see. But, hey, I mean, you know what? Whether they do that or not, I'm still Dusty May, heck of a year. But yeah, I think Florida is my SEC sleeper team too. For them to battle through that early season noise, everything that was going on there, not lose a game during that time and keep it rolling, to me, that's like the type of team who can make some noise in an NCAA tournament.
Absolutely.
But, Dom, thank you so much for taking some time to hop on with us today. Where can the people find your work? I saw that you released the bracket on the, is it CBK Report, or where can we find it?
Yeah, I'm working with CBK Report this year, saving me a lot of work making graphics. I'm give them my seed list that I'd spend time to put together, and then they put it out into a really nice looking bracket or seed list for now. Going to actually put them in bracket form a little bit closer to Selection Sunday. But yeah, go on Twitter and either go to my Twitter at BracketDom, where I'll repost the seed list that they make of mine. They make it look real nice. But then I'm also constantly posting just my thoughts about the results of games and how I think that's going to affect the bracket. So check out my Twitter at BracketDom and CBK Reports as well, since they've been doing such a great job with me this year, helping me make those seed lists into nice graphics.
Right. I mean, everyone likes to give those aggregation accounts a hard time, but they do a good job and they promote this, some do and promote the sport in a really good way. So that's a cool partnership right there. And best of luck. I know the next 2 weeks are going to be really insane, probably for you with everything that
Oh
goes
yeah.
on. So, Dom, thank you once again, folks. If you missed any of this, make sure to rewind after we're done. We touch everything you need to know heading into the final weekend. Me and Dom got you covered. We're going to take a quick break right here on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. We got another guest for you coming up in just a little bit. Rocco Miller of the Bracketeer joins us. We got another Bracketology special coming up. Folks, we'll
I
be
know
with
him. He's great as well. So yeah.
There you go, folks. Vouching right there. We appreciate you, Dom, and we'll be right back, folks.
Thanks for having me on. I had a blast.
Welcome back, folks. Just after 5:30, Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer will be joining us right here on the Lastella Report momentarily. Robbie Lastella here with you on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. If you missed any of our interview with Dom Lease of Bracketometry, folks, you got to wait until this episode's over. I'm sorry, but you'll want to hit the rewind button. Everything Dom told us will have you prepared for the final few weeks of March. And Rocco will be joining us shortly, and he'll give you everything you need to know on a little bit. We're going to go a little bit deeper with Rocco, a good friend of ours, on right here on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. But I'm excited. It's my favorite time of the year, folks. And if you guys aren't following any of the smaller conference tournaments going on, make sure to tune in. ASUN going on right now. But we'll talk a little bit more about these smaller conference tournaments with our guy Rocco Miller, who I will be putting on screen with me here once I get it situated, folks. Bear with me just one moment, and we'll have you guys seeing Rocco instead of just my ugly face here in just a moment. Rocco, how's it going?
Oh, it's great, man. You just brighten my day. All that sunshine in South Florida, baby. How
I
are you, Big
know.
Robbie?
Oh man, I'm doing good. I'm glad to have you on. Where in the world are you right now? Are we back in San Diego, or are you watching North Dakota State again?
I wish I was in San Diego. I'm up in the Bay Area at my normal place of residence. In the office, we have the mock committee starting on Thursday morning. So I've packed all of my interviews like this and doing radio stuff Monday through Wednesday. We have shows at night. These are sleepless nights, my man, but it's all good because we're gonna be sitting around talking hoops. We have a nice slate of Tuesday night games tonight, some important high major games, some conference tournaments tipping off. There's a little bit of everything in college basketball today, and it's only going to get better every day from here until Selection Sunday.
I mean, how about the ASUN tournament? I mean, we'll get into that a little bit more, but I'm watching that last night. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at the Final Four right now, and there's a ton of contenders in that conference. It's exciting, Rocco. It's the most fun part of the year. Are you going to any conference tournaments? Or are you locked away in your bunker until the brackets finalized?
I am going to sneak away for a couple days to Vegas. I do the WCC semifinals and finals every year. The timing is perfect because it's Monday and Tuesday before things get hot and heavy with everything else on Wednesday. So they get their special 2 nights. We end up seeing the same movie every year, St. Mary's Gonzaga for the title. So in my heart of hearts, I'd love to see one of our neighbors here pull off the upset. Santa Clara's got a couple NBA players. Chances are pretty good they'll play St. Mary's in that first semifinal. We'll see if they can finally solve the Gales. But otherwise, probably going to see another St. Mary's Gonzaga championship next Tuesday.
The Dons of San Francisco. They've got a win over Gonzaga this year, if I remember correctly, right? No, no.
No, yeah. So the Dons have lost 32 in a row to Gonzaga. It's
Oh,
uh,
my
it's
bad.
like insane. But yeah, and unfortunately for the Dons, and I don't want to write them off. They're tough as hell, and they have two amazing guards in Malik Thomas and Marcus Williams. But their backup guard, who plays quite a bit, Ryan Beasley, he took a bad injury during the first half of the Gonzaga game Saturday and had to go to the hospital. And chances are pretty strong he's done for the year. And they had already lost Chips Newberry on the front court, one of their most important players, back in December to a torn ACL. So the Dons have just had some brutal luck with the injuries. So they got to overcome all that, and they got to find a way to beat Gonzaga next Monday, hopefully for them, because they do have to win Sunday as well. It's a very big uphill climb, but the Dons aren't dead yet.
Yeah, that conference, the whole West Coast this year. I mean, the Big West, everything is there's a ton of good games out there this year.
Yeah.
But I want to dive into it a little bit because Dom asked me something, and I remembered it during the break when you were joining, but I didn't get to ask him. But I want to ask you because I'm sure you've got the answers that I need to know. When is the bracket actually finalized? Because I remember last year FAU's loss to Temple. Everyone thought that may get them eliminated from at-large contention, but they had already begun seeding the 8-9 line. So when actually is the final bracket finished? From what you know?
Yeah, I mean they'll never say that publicly, but my understanding of the process, and because of the mock committee, I'm part of it. I'm actually part of two of them. There's another one I join as much as I can over Skype. RIP Skype. I guess that's going away. We'll have to do
Yeah,
it on
you're going to Zoom.
We'll have to do it on Zoom this year. My understanding of the process is by the time we get to Saturday morning, which, for the American Conference, it's still going into their semifinals. Um, they are pretty much wrapped up with a lot of the voting. And by Saturday night, they're basically just building what we call contingency brackets. So it's as if, like last year, Temple, they had to build a bracket as if Temple won the game Sunday because going into Sunday, they need to have all the scenarios covered. because there is no CBS is not going to wait for them. CBS is starting that selection show at 6 p.m. Eastern every year, no matter what. So all that stuff has to be done before games even start Sunday. And, the process is very intuitive. It takes a lot of different stages of voting. Then when you've selected the 68 teams, Robbie, you go into what's called scrubbing and seeding. So you
Gotcha.
have your original board of 1 through 68 and what order all the teams are in. And then you do the scrubbing process, and it leaves the door open for committee members to say, hey, listen, this doesn't look right to me. Should we move so and so above so and so? And then that can cause a whole new conversation and debates. So they want, I think, just based on the timing and understanding all the steps, I think they want all that stuff done by Saturday early so they can just spend Saturday night working on the contingency brackets, because that does take a long time.
What conference tournaments do you think are going to cause these folks the most headaches? Who is where? I mean, the bid stealers to me jump out from Memphis and Drake potentially if they lose. But is there any other that you see causing chaos here down the stretch?
Well, in general, yes, but I think the easy answer to your question, to give you the quick answer first, is the ones that finish on Sunday. So the obvious are American and Atlantic 10. So if the committee, that's where VCU gets really interesting, because if right now VCU's on track to get the number one seed, and I think most of us agree they're slightly in with their resume alone. Even if they miss the A10 championship, the automatic bid, if VCU loses early in that tournament, then the committee will be able to kind of vote as if they're an at large. But if they are still alive, but they go into a final game, they're probably going to need to make sure VCU is in no matter what. And then with the American Conference, we already know what we're getting into there. Memphis is the only team assured of a spot. So somebody else, even if Memphis makes the finals, the team coming from the other side of the bracket, the committee's going to have a plan for that.
Yeah.
So that's actually, to me, that's not very chaotic, because they already know what they're getting into with the American. Whereas the A10 could be chaotic with VCU already being somewhat of a bubble team. They have to figure out if they want to include them or not if they get knocked out. And then in general, I took the question as which tournaments are going to be pretty unpredictable. And I think the Horizon League every year is always full of upsets. That quarterfinal round, a lot of games go to overtime. There's dramatic finishes, so certainly keep your eye on the Horizon. They get to play on campus for the quarterfinals, and then they go to Indianapolis for the semis and finals. So it's all broken up, and it's a reseed every round. So it's very unpredictable. You really can't even fill out a bracket, because once an upset happens, the team goes to somewhere else than where you might have thought of they would go originally. And then I would also say the Big Sky from that level. The Big Sky this year, Montana and Northern Colorado just shared the championship last night. Northern Colorado will have the number one seed. But I've been following this league, and the travel's crazy, and everybody's going to Boise, Idaho, where there's really not a big advantage unless you want to include Idaho State in that mix. They're the 4 seed. I think the door is wide open. We saw the 5 seed Montana State win it last year. Here we are again with Montana State getting the 5 seed again. Portland State is a sleeper playing the best defense, the 3 seed. So that one just reeks of chaos coming. And then I think the other one, just more at the bigger stage, the Mountain West. As of this conversation, Robbie, only San Diego State, New Mexico, and Utah State are close to being assured of being in, or are probably in. And there's teams like Boise State playing their best basketball. Colorado State's playing their best basketball. UNLV has won 5 out of 6, and Nevada's still pretty talented. So I think there's a really decent opportunity for one of those 4 to emerge, win the tournament, and get the league a 4th bid.
Yeah, you mentioned the Horizon League. I'm rooting for chaos. I want to see Doug Gottlieb saging the sidelines at a championship game. Give it to me. I'm rooting for some. Yeah, I'm rooting for some real chaos going on over there in the Horizon League. That would be the what did he say? People need to give him if they come back. I forgot his wording, but he said people need to apologize if Green Bay makes a run. So we're rooting for that. I'm rooting for chaos for sure. But you brought it up. You mentioned a couple mid-major conferences. Out of all the teams that you think will probably win the championship, is there one that stands out to you as a potential team that can make some noise in March? Is it Drake? Is it? I guess we can say Memphis is a mid-major. Is it? Is there? I don't know who's standing out to you, Rocco?
Well, if you like beautiful basketball, I would certainly suggest first the UC San Diego Tritons. These guys are amazing to watch. They love playing together. From that perspective, they remind me of the original Florida Atlantic team that went to the Final Four. Now they don't have the level of athlete that a John L. Davis or a Vlad Golden or the guys that you guys had at FAU. They don't have that level of athlete, which I think you need to get all the way to the Final Four. Maybe UC San Diego will test that theory because the way they're playing right now, they're an absolute freight train. They've been winning games by 50 points. And when you watch their possessions, everybody touches the ball. Nobody's standing around. There's constant movement. Some of these guys are originally international players out of Australia, New Zealand, and a lot of the other guys are originally Division II players. And they don't make mistakes. They're fundamentally sound. They won at Utah State, which is a brutal place to win. So they've proven themselves against the upper echelon of college basketball on the road. And I was at the game with everything on the line at Irvine, and they went to UC Irvine, a team that hadn't lost a home game in 2 years, and they beat them by 18. It was just a clinic, absolute clinic. So I think this team's got the goods to get in, even if they lost the Big West Finals. They certainly don't want to mess around with that too much, but they just look so good. They're getting a lot of top 25 votes right now, and I think that's so well deserved and so good to see. And then the other team, I will stand up for Drake. They've had a lot of close calls, like Missouri State's last place in their league. They had to go overtime 2 different times to beat to beat Missouri State, to beat the Bears. And to me, it's about the way they manage possessions. They're always in control of the game. They always have that cerebral, like, we're going to get a bucket when we need it, and leadership behind Bennett Sturts. And these guys have been playing together for years at Northwest Missouri State, transferred with the hiring of Ben McCollum. They all came together from there. They added Cam from the portal. He came from Wyoming. And so they are just such a deliberate team, and they proved it at the highest level, beating Vanderbilt by 11 at the game you were at, Charleston Classic Championship game. So I just think this team's got the goods to continue to advance, even if it's ugly, even if they win 50-48. They're gonna find ways to win.
That's the team. I mean, I haven't seen too much UC San Diego basketball, to be fair, but to me, Drake jumps off like the old FAU team. They don't have the athletes. Bennett Sturts is not Elijah Martin, but they've got that fundamentally sound way of playing. They find a way to do it the same way FAU had to find a way to win those Conference USA games that year. They did. They had a couple slip-ups, which is better than Drake. Drake, I don't think, had any slip-ups, but that they've got a lot. I like the coaching, and I'm interested to see what happens in the offseason over there, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But while we're on mid-majors, I want to talk about some of these conference tournaments we have going on. Right now, it's the A-Sun. I was talking about that before you came in here because it's on TV right now. That's not right now, but last couple days. And I like the Final Four right now between North Alabama, Jacksonville, Lipscomb, and Queens. They've all had big moments, and they've all played well to get to this point. Do you have a favorite, or is it really anyone's game down the stretch? And to follow up, if Queens wins, I know they're not eligible, so who's going to the NCAA tournament?
I got you, Robbie. So the pick I made at the start, I'll stick with my pick. I did well yesterday, except for I had Eastern Kentucky over Jacksonville. That's where I slipped up. But I will say this. Queens went to Lipscomb this year and won. They played one of their best games of the year, which is required because Lipscomb has a lot of talent. But Queens knows what it takes to go in there and win. That was my kind of sexy upset to get Queens to the championship game. We'll see if that comes through. And if that happens, they would have to go to North Alabama, as long as North Alabama can get by Jacksonville. Now, North Alabama, Jacksonville is a very good matchup because Jacksonville plays the best defense in the league. They have Robert McCray the fifth. He's an incredible scorer, one of the best scorers in the country. So I don't think it's going to be easy for North Alabama, but I think one of the great stories of the A-Sun is just the atmosphere in Florence, Alabama, the way that the community has gotten behind that team. It's going to be rowdy. It was rocking. And that game against Austin Peay yesterday was over in the first 10 minutes because the Lions are just thriving off that atmosphere. So my pick is still North Alabama to win it all and beat Queens in the championship game. But to answer your overall question, the tiebreaker, if Queens wins it all, is North Alabama and Lipscomb. They finished tied for first, right? So they're co-champions. Then the first tiebreaker would be if North Alabama gets to the finals, then they're in the NCAA no matter what if they're playing Queens, because they went further into the bracket than Lipscomb did. But if they both lose and it's Queens over Jacksonville in the title game, which means neither Lipscomb or North Alabama got further than the semis, then Lipscomb actually gets to go because they were the one seed that won that tiebreaker. That would be pretty heartbreaking for North Alabama, but if you lose in the semis, you leave it up to that. So that's how the tiebreakers are shaking out, and we got some drama coming.
Yeah, I'm hope. I mean, I don't want to root for Jacksonville to lose, but that if Jacksonville were to go all the way, beat Queens, you're saying they wouldn't get in?
No, if Jacksonville beats Queens, they're in. Yes,
but no, sorry. If Queens beats Jacksonville,
yeah. If Queens beats Jacksonville, then Lipscomb is in.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's up. Jordan Mincy would have something to say for sure about that one if they were to lose. That's an interesting tiebreaker. I did not know that, but that's why we have you, Rocco.
It happened a couple of years ago when Bellarmine won it, and they were not eligible, and that's what got Jacksonville State before they left the league into the tournament.
The more you know. I like you mentioned Austin Peay last night. They kind of brought that on themselves though with that environment. With didn't they not shake hands? And I think that's what happened. Yeah, they didn't shake hands, and that created some drama. But that's good. I like drama. That's what college basketball is. It's all about. But going over to the Sun Belt a little bit, 6-10 plus team wins, some of the best coaching in the mid-major level, in my opinion, right now. Lower mid-major level. I don't know if they've got some guys that out in the Mountain West, but anyway, just the whole conference to me seems really competitive, chaotic. Out of the top four there in the Sun Belt, JMU, South Alabama. I'm blanking on the other two at the moment, but is there anyone that stands out to you as a surefire contender to win that one?
Well, they're all in the mix. They shared the title four ways. The other two teams are Arkansas State and Troy. And it's interesting. I would have said that Arkansas State and Troy are the two most likely to win it, but they lost the tiebreakers. So now with this, we call it the stairway to 7 because there's 7 days of required winning if you're at the bottom. So the teams playing tonight would have to win every day from now until next Monday night, which is the championship night. But so South Alabama, the 1, James Madison, the 2, they have a bye all the way till Sunday. We call that a quintuple bye. And Arkansas State and Troy just have a quadruple bye. So they'll have to play Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to win the title. Still not unreasonable at all. Arkansas State, as Memphis well knows, has the most talent in this league. They have a lot of Power 5 level players. They won at Memphis by double digits. They're very good when they're on their best, but some of the teams in their bracket they've already lost to. So Marshall is the 5 seed, and that's their most likely opponent on Saturday. And Marshall only played them once and beat Arkansas State. So it's very interesting. And then if Arkansas State does advance past Marshall or whoever it is, they would have to play South Alabama, who they also lost to. So I find that pretty fascinating, even though Arkansas State, you could pencil in. If you're in one of those pools where they give you extra credit for picking a higher seed, since Arkansas State's the 4, they're kind of the no-brainer pick to get those bonus points. But this is going to be a very unpredictable tournament, I think, based on the fact that some of these matchups are different and unique. The styles are so different. and they're throwing all these teams down there in Pensacola, Florida, where anything can happen. And on the other side of the bracket, Troy, I like a lot because they were my preseason pick to win this tournament because they have the most amount of seniors. They've been playing together a long time. Scott Cross is a very underrated coach. Got a raw deal when he was the UT Arlington coach before this. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. I think their players have a chip on their shoulder. And I do like their side of the bracket better, getting James Madison. I think they can take out the Dukes. So I am going to go with Troy as my pick.
Well, there we go. Troy Trojans. I'm sure their fans are happy to hear that. Been some down years in football, so they need some good basketball right now. But shifting over to the AAC, obviously Memphis is the favor here. Do you think this is Penny's best team that he's had in his time there? And is there anyone you see that can give Memphis some trouble?
Yeah, I mean I think they've had even more talented teams, but I think some of those years they were just more inconsistent. So I want to give Penny and this year's team some credit just for not finding too many bumps in the road. They've had some seriously loaded teams almost every year he's been there. I think every year he's been here, you could argue that. But they've had, I mean, was it last year when they lost at home to Rice and, just so many head scratching losses in the league. I think the hardest part of his job is navigating the 2 months of league play because Memphis operates at a whole different level than anybody else in the American, whether it's budget, whether it's roster. But I also think the travel's pretty hard in the American, as you know, Robbie.
Yeah.
And there's going to just be nights where it's really hard to get your guys going. I think they've done a better job this year of that. There's no question. And I think when it comes to matchups nationally, I think it's going to feel good. Like they're going to finally be able to breathe. Like no more, not they've been in all these games lately where they have everything to lose and not a whole lot to gain. And I think that's going to flip when they get to the NCAAs, right? They'll have everything to gain. And so they performed so well in the non-conference, beating teams like Ole Miss and Clemson, a nice list of teams they beat in non-conference. So they'll start playing those types of teams again. In my bracket yesterday, I had them in a 6 versus 11 game against Xavier. I would like their chances there. And then if they win, they get Kentucky. I think they could beat Kentucky if they play their best. And I just think it's all upside from there once Memphis gets into the actual bracket. So just hang with those Tigers if you're a Memphis fan for a couple more weeks, and then sky's the limit once they're in the tournament. I don't think there's a particular matchup I'm necessarily worried about. It's more about Memphis, like staying together, being good teammates. Guys like Haggerty and others have NBA scouts all over them right now. They got to stay focused and stay together as a team, and they can push this thing pretty far.
Yeah, Danger had his way with Yaks in the last game, and that to me was the only question mark left.
Both times. He owned Yaks both times.
Yeah, so it's like outside of that, it's going to be tough. And like you mentioned, I agree. What it'll come down to is if they have a down night shooting wise, can they overcome that? And with the way Danger's been playing, they can feed him in the post. I don't see a way they don't win, but hey, anything's possible in March.
They do, yeah. I mean, they do depend a lot on mid-range jumpers, but they're very good at them. So, if they run into like a defensive, configuration that they have to adjust to, that could be problematic. But otherwise, I think Memphis is good enough and talented enough to, just make it about themselves and stay focused.
Last conference tournament before I get into some off-season news I want to touch on. There's a bunch more, but we don't have time for all of them, unfortunately. Two-bid Big West. What does UC Irvine have to do to get back to at-large chances, or are they already comfortably in there?
Oh, I wish they were comfortably in. Yeah, so UC Irvine, after they lost to UC San Diego, took another loss to Cal State Northridge, who's also a really good team. Northridge, most people aren't probably paying attention to, but they've cracked the top 100 in net. And that's a big deal for the Big West to have 3 teams in the top 100 of net. So when you're playing Northridge, it's a top half of quad 2 road game, which is where UC San Diego won last week. And I think Irvine, after that second loss, kind of been on the outside looking in. But the bubble is so wild right now. I was very tempted to put Irvine in as the last at-large team. But here's the deal for two Big West. I think this is pretty common sense. If UC San Diego just gets to the championship game, I have a pretty strong feeling they're getting in. And, best case for the league is that Irvine knocks them off so that way they can both go. They both had incredible years. But, even if they lost to Northridge in the finals or somebody else, I think that gets the league two bids. If it's UC Irvine that's in the at-large pool, they certainly would have to get to the championship game. But like we talked about earlier with the way the committee does their process, they're going to have to agree that UC Irvine belongs in like by Thursday of that week. They're not going to know that they've made the finals. And that's why I have a very difficult time like putting them in because just going through chronologically how that would have to work, it's hard to envision that. So just for the league's sake, have UC San Diego lose the championship game and we're good to go.
Gotcha. And so I do want to shift into some off-season talk because it's going to come up quicker than we think. This last few weeks will fly by. And you're all over the country. You see a lot of teams. We talked about the coaching talent a little bit in the Sun Belt with Brian Hodgson and Preston Spaulding. But is there, besides them, is there any mid-major head coaching candidates you expect to be a hot commodity this offseason?
Well, there should be a number of them. So, yeah, I think, I think Ben McCollum's phone will be ringing a lot at Drake, even though it's still his first year. I already know of a few athletic directors that are all over him. It's going to be up to him if he wants to, jump now or time it. We saw last year, Will Wade had a great first year with McNeese where he could have had some other jobs right away, but he signed an extension and fulfilled his commitment to stay at McNeese for 2 years. I think you will see Will Wade make a move this year. There's a good chance he'll land in the SEC. Texas probably being the most likely. So that's one you can kind of bank on, I would say. I think Eric Olin, the UC San Diego coach, just all the exposure they're getting and the great offense they run. He's going to have some offers. He'll have to decide if he wants to stick around or go. And for him, it's probably just more, can I get it into one of the power leagues straight from UC San Diego, or do I have to do WCC Mountain West first? Those are the things he has to like play out with his agent. Man, the list goes on. Ryan Odom at VCU. It's pretty obvious who's going to get the looks. It's the teams having great years. So Ryan Odom at VCU, there's a chance he could land it like a Virginia or maybe a Villanova if that opens. So yeah, there's endless possibilities. And then once some of those places like VCU are really, really good mid-major jobs. So then we got to start thinking about who's going to take those spots.
Will be a lot to watch in the coaching department, but something that I wanted to ask about scheduling wise. An article came out today from Jason Munns over at the Commercial Appeal, where he talked to Tim Pernetti, and Tim Pernetti says he wants to get the AAC back to a multi-bid league. Do you think that's possible with the current slate of teams? Is it still possible for AAC teams to get a strong enough non-conference schedule to be fielding a multi-bid league team?
Well, it's different for every team because scheduling, the way it works is other teams are scouting you and you have kind of a forecasted range. So Memphis has one of the best schedules in the country every year because you basically can match Memphis's talent with a high major, and that's why they play so many ACC and SEC teams. But those ACC and SEC teams are not going to play Tulsa. They're not going to play UTSA. They're not going to. And if FAU is coming off of a year where they're 100th in the net or 110th in the net, somewhere in that range, they're not going to play them either. So you get exhausted in scheduling because you want to play all those teams just like Memphis is playing, but you're going to get nothing but no's. And so what the league needs to do, what Tim needs to be a part of, is arrange a conference challenge. They don't have one. It doesn't make sense to me. Do one with the Atlantic 10, do one with the Mountain West, somebody at the next level, or even the WCC, somebody at the next level just below Power 5, so you can at least fix it so your teams are playing teams at your like level. The other thing is these budgets are still pretty good because all these AAC teams, for the most part, obviously Wichita doesn't, but have football, and so they have the ability to go schedule 6 or 7 home games and spend the money and go get some wins that way. It's not the worst way to go. They just need to find a better balance. Um, and I think the real problem with the league this year, and maybe it's a perpetual problem at this point, is when you have like Tulsa's best player, PJ Haggerty, when Memphis can just make a call and have him next year. And if it wasn't Memphis, he would have gone to SEC, ACC, Big Ten, right?
Yeah.
Uh, your best players are going to keep moving up, and then you've got to do a good job of bringing guys to you. But even if you do build a good roster, like we've seen, UAB got off to a real slow start. Now they finally got it going. Even North Texas, to a degree, started a little slower than how good they actually are. When you're constantly having to put a new team together, you're not going to have a good non-conference. It takes like 6 to 8 weeks at least of real basketball games to figure out the right rotations, figure out what you got, get those guys cohesive together, and you're going to take some losses in that process that you probably shouldn't have. And I think that's really hurting the league because it's a league where the rosters keep getting flipped because the Americans stuck in the middle.
It's a challenge indeed. I don't have it. I wish I had an answer for Tim either. But like you said, I think the best. He mentioned the A10 partnership. He said that there's been discussions that's already been had on it, and so
Yeah,
hopefully that's something that comes into fruition.
I asked the A10 commissioner about it at A10 Media Day. I was there in Washington, D.C. in October, and Bernadette McGlade told me to my face in front of a whole audience that it wasn't their fault. So she's basically blaming the American for it. And whatever the drama is, I'm not worried about the drama part. It's just like make it happen already because it's a no brainer.
Rocco, we're pretty much out of time, but I got to hit you with the hardest hitting question. I did this to Dom, so I'm going to do it to you. If the season ended today, who's in your final four?
Well, we haven't seen the bracket. That's impossible to know. But
But no, I'm saying like if the NCAA tournament was at this point in the season, who would you think is in the final four?
no, I'm with you. I'm with you. But I need to see the matchups because there's certain teams that can debilitate other really good teams, but if they don't have to play that kind of team, they have a better path. But I'll digress on that. I think Duke and Auburn are clearly the two best teams in the sport. They've earned that. They've dominated, but there is enough variance. I have a feeling maybe one of those two don't make it. I don't know which, but the other one certainly will. And then I've been impressed with the gear that obviously Houston and Florida can get to. I think those are the four best teams in the country, but there's going to be some wild cards in there. And one team that I saw down in Athens that I was blown away by, and they'll be about a 4 or a 5 seed, is the Missouri Tigers. They're old. They have shooters. Caleb Grill and Tamar Bates are probably the best shooting tandem on the same team I've seen all year anywhere at any level. And they have great post play. Mark Mitchell's there from Duke, and they're old as hell. Like everybody's like 23, 24 on that team. I think I guess the jury's a little bit out on if Dennis Gates can coach this team in those tight battles that March Madness produces. But I think Missouri is a very good upside team to lean on. Texas Tech, same thing. The way, if they're healthy, Williams and McMillan have been in and out of the lineup. They got to get that squared away. But if you get a healthy Texas Tech team, that's a good pick because they can shoot the lights out and they can shoot over the top with their length. I think that makes a huge difference. So let's just go with Auburn as the easy pick, and I will take Texas Tech, Missouri. Actually, no, we'll let Auburn get upset. I'll take Duke instead. So I'll go Duke, Florida, Missouri, Texas Tech.
I like it. You got some variance in there. You didn't go all ones. That would have been the easy way out.
It's
Rocco,
not going to happen.
no, it'll never happen. But you know what? Maybe one year it will, and then we'll all be shocked. Who knows?
It did. 2008. It happened. The only time ever.
The more you know. See, folks, this is why we bring Rocco Miller on to the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. He gives us the information that we would not know. Rocco, thank you so much for taking some time, as always, in your busiest couple weeks of the year. We greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime, man. Enjoy the games.
We will. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lastella Report. We've got everything covered from you, from this weekend's matchup to conference tournaments to off-season to bracket predictions and more with Dom from Bracketometry and Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org. Make sure to go check out that Bracketeer.org. He's got the most updated right now bracket on the website currently. Am I right, Rocco?
Yes, as of March 3rd, yesterday, and we will be updating every Monday and Friday.
There you go, folks. For up-to-date bracket news, make sure to go check that out. Folks, we'll see you next time right here on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. For Rocco Miller, I'm Robbie Lastella. We'll see you soon.